right. Well, welcome everyone to the first episode of the Green Mountain Prosperity Podcast with Americans for Prosperity, where we will be discussing local, state, and national topics affecting Vermonters in their daily lives. I am your host, Ross Connolly. We will be having conversations with experts on many topics over the next few months as we put out more episodes covering topics like technology, economics, healthcare, regulations, energy, and more. No matter our political differences, we all care about the same issues and the people being impacted by those issues. We may disagree on the solutions, and that is okay. We hope this forum will be an informative and entertaining way to have these important discussions with the public. And we at Americans for Prosperity, if you're unfamiliar with us, we are the nation's largest grassroots organization, primarily focused on breaking down barriers in government that are holding Vermonters and Americans back from reaching their full potential. We believe in and operate under the great words of Frederick Douglass: we will work with anyone to do good and nobody to do evil. And we hope that you join us in this effort. You continue to tune in to the Green Mountain Prosperity Podcast, and you can take action and get involved in your local community by visiting greenmountainprosperity.com to learn more. And we have a great first guest here today. Representative Michael Taglia grew up in the rural east end of Long Island. As a young man, he was a landscaper, carpenter, Grumman aircraft systems airframe mechanic, and a seasonal police officer. As an adult, his work ethic, management skills, customer service abilities, and fiscal responsibility ensured the success of his two pool service businesses. Mike also has a CDLA license, which he used to assist the town of Washington's road crew during those terrible floods just a couple years ago. Mike lives in Corinth with his wife on a beautiful piece of land in an off-grid cabin. He's an avid hunter and enjoys all things outdoors. Mike is very passionate about and a staunch steward of his land and the wildlife that also calls it home. He is also the co-host of Right Side Up, a weekly radio show and podcast. He's a member of the House Committee on Environment Canvassing Committee and the Sportsman Caucus. He's been a member of the House of Representatives from 2025 to present. He represents Orange 1 in the State House. Representative, thanks so much for joining the first episode of the Green Mountain Prosperity Podcast. It's great to have you on. Excited to talk about a really important topic that lots of Vermonters are concerned about, which is energy policy, price increases in energy, and then hopefully we're going to be talking about some of the solutions that people can look to as alternatives to these mandates that have been in place. But thanks so much for joining the show.
It's an honor to join you. It's an honor to be called as your first guest on your inaugural show. So I hope I do you proud.
Oh, I have no doubt. So really, we saw it in last year's election, just a huge amount of frustration with the status quo around energy policy. There's a lot of these green mandates and things that are driving up the cost of whether it's electricity, home heating fuel, even cars when it comes to EV mandates. What have you been hearing from your constituents about, and just Vermonters across the state, about their frustrations with the current energy policy?
Well, Ross, I have to tell you, the worst part of the frustrations I hear is, and I'm still hearing it, I've even heard it last week more than once, is people are still considering moving out of the state of Vermont because of the affordability issues. And I try to urge them to stay, to get involved in not only their local politics, but see what's going on in the State House and find out what their legislators are doing and what they're sponsoring, to see if they're actually helping make or trying to help make Vermont more affordable, or if they're part of the problem. So affordability and with a close second being public safety, are the two major things. And like you said, I'm a freshman legislator, and I believe I was elected in a tax revolt, and that's what drove people to the polls in record numbers to get a record number of seats in the Vermont House flipped, because people they're fed up. They don't want to be taxed right out of the state. So here I am, and I've learned a lot. I'm very happy to be on the Environment Committee, and like you brought out, some of the green initiatives have made Vermont one of the most expensive states for energy. If what I think it's maybe second, I can't remember. It's up in the top three at least. So
Yeah, and when you add that to the overall tax burden, Vermont is the third highest overall tax state in the country, behind Hawaii and New York, if I remember correctly. So, like, it's just, to your point, the affordability issue, it's just tacking on one thing on top of the other. I know you sponsored a lot of some of the bills to try and fix some of these problems, and undo some of these top-down sort of solutions from Montpelier that seem to be driving up the costs and what people are most frustrated about. What are some of those policies that are, impacting Vermonters that, you're most focused on in the State House?
Well, the clean heat standard, there was something, a few months ago. I think it was just before we uh, got out of session, how that the clean heat standard was dead, but it's really not dead. It's kind of in cold storage. And I try to stress that every chance I get, that the clean heat standard, there's a bill for repeal, or there's a bill. Yes, there's a bill for repeal, and there's a bill that it was supposed to be voted on to see if there was going to be any carbon tax at all. That's basically what it is. It's been called a number of things, but that's basically what it is. And until we take that bill off the wall and vote it down and run it through the shredder, then there's still the possibility that we could see fuel taxes in the form carbon tax, whatever. If it's additional money out of your pocket, who cares what we call it? So that's one of the things that I think come January, we need to hit the ground running, and to send a message to Vermonters that we're serious about making Vermont affordable, is deal with the clean heat standard. The Global Warming Solutions Act is another thing. There's a total, I think there's a complete repeal bill out there, and there's also a bill with another option, just to take the mandates and turn them to goals, which would stop the issue of us worrying about being sued by even out-of-state entities and being caught up with the costs involved with a lawsuit, not just to engage in the lawsuit, but the potential ramifications if we lose a lawsuit. So there's that. Now we have S127, which I believe is now Act 69, which was a housing initiative, but where the housing initiative is at odds with Act 59. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that. That's the 30 by 30, 50 by 50, trying to preserve 30% of Vermont by 2030 and 50% by 2050. If we have a housing initiative, we're running one act up against another. And if we're taking land out of circulation, then the remaining land is going to be more expensive. So that's counterproductive to the affordability that we're seeking. So that one, I hope, since we're 27% to the goal of 30 by 30, why would we not want to tap the brakes on that?
That's
Because
the thing.
we're so close.
I mean, Vermont, we rank as one of the highest states in carbon reduction in the country. Like, little Vermont's not going to solve, this whole problem alone, and we don't want to hurt the people of Vermont just,
No, we don't.
for the sake of it. and the prices, the affordability issue is just really, especially the most vulnerable, like the folks on the lowest end of the economic spectrum. That's what bad energy, that's who is most affected by bad energy policy.
Yes.
Talk about, you mentioned, goals versus mandates. I think that's really important distinction. Goals are great. Everyone wants to have goals in life. It's an aspirational sort of thing.
Yep.
But mandates cause problems. Can you talk about just the difference between those two?
Well, the goals would, like you said, we're a very environmentally conscious state, have been for a very long time. Keeping that in mind, a public outreach and education program, rather than a statute that says you will reach these mandates, you will reach these thresholds of reduction, or else, is counterproductive. And keep in mind, some of these mandates are requiring us to go back to 1990s levels of carbon emissions, which, I mean, we can argue that would probably be another show about carbon emissions and whether they're detrimental or not. But to try to go to 1990s levels when we're in 2025 and we're looking to increase our population and to build houses, it's just, to me, it's completely unattainable. And that's why I said we have the Global Warming Solutions Act and its mandates in competition with the idea of us creating affordable housing and just an affordable economy for Vermonters in general. So that's why I would like to see the goals instead of mandates. So, and the GWSA is just like this, the legislature telling the hardworking, tax-paying Vermonters, do what we want you to do or else. And that's just, I just think that's not the way we should be doing governance and enacting statutes in the state of Vermont.
Yeah, and it's a shame that, no action was taken. You listed a whole bunch of solutions that were provided this legislative session, but nothing's really moved, even though a mass amount of the Vermont population really demanded change to the direction we were going, and they continue to do so. The ones that aren't voting with their feet, that is, that are leaving the state
Right.
entirely. So, something has to change, and these are reasonable, proposals. We at AFP, we don't believe in picking winners and losers at all. Everyone should sort of just be on an equal playing field. We're not against green energy. We're not, for a different type of energy, but we believe in having an equal playing field. Mandates in general are bad. It's a top-down solution from governments that it usually benefits some and leaves most folks behind, which these mandates are some of the greatest example of that. Is some people might be benefiting. Most people are struggling to figure out, can I afford to buy, go out for dinner with my family, or do I pay the gas bill? So,
and it's sometimes it gets worse than that. Some people with the clean car and truck rule, for instance, the governor issued an executive order delaying it 1 year, which means in this next session, beginning in January, we're going to have to revisit that, hopefully, if we don't repeal it, because there is a bill, another one, I think, to delay it 3 or 5 years. I can't remember. There's a legislator, I'm not going to use names because I don't know the bill number, but there is a legislator who was one of the seats that got flipped, who brought up the bill, introduced the bill to delay the clean car and truck rule. But in absence of that coming off the wall, the governor issued an executive order, because we in the state of Vermont are really not in a position to only have EVs or hybrids. We're really not. And like you said, the clean car and truck rule will hurt those that can afford it least, because EVs and hybrids typically are more expensive than a small or medium size or compact internal combustion engine vehicle. And because of that clean car and truck rule, some of the manufacturers are hesitant to even send some of their most popular fuel efficient internal combustion engine vehicles to dealerships in Vermont. So we're hurting our businesses because of the legislation we've passed. It's really counterproductive.
I call that one the great New Hampshire auto dealer subsidy bill, because that is exactly what would happen. Everyone would just go next door and buy a
Yeah,
gas powered car there, because it's only for auto sales in Vermont. And
yeah.
there's also like a 10%, like 10% of heavy trucks, if I remember correctly, have to be electric. Something that legitimately, like, it exists. It's kind of
It's
meant
not
for
feasible.
cities. Tesla has one,
Yeah.
but they're really still be in the testing phase in cities. Let's just say I wouldn't want to be driving one of those, driving up one of the Green Mountains.
Well, Ross, I can tell you, I like you said in the intro, I have a Class A license. I drove a 10-wheel dump truck. I drove it plowing snow. I drove it hauling material to and from mines, building roads and stuff. I believe the batteries for those trucks weigh something in the order of 8,000 pounds, somewhere in that, batteries and the technology that go with them. If you add that much weight to the vehicle, the unladen weight, then you can haul 8,000 pounds less in material that you need to move, which means if a 10 wheeler that I drove could haul 16 yards, whatever the tonnage of 16 yards is, depending on how wet it is, you could be cutting the capacity in half. So you're not going to be saving much if you've got to make twice the number of trips. Keep in mind also, I spoke with a driver, I think it was about last year, who said there was a dealership in Vermont that was going to get an EV because they were worried about this mandate. You have to sell a certain number of EV trucks before you can sell another internal combustion engine truck. Well, it had to be hauled here on a flatbed rather than driven because it didn't have the range, and it was only coming from somewhere in upstate New York. So, you brought it up. We have to stop doing policy that feels good and do stuff that works.
Exactly. And that it's the sort of thing where you're picking what the consumer, you're getting involved between consumers and their choice.
Yes.
And if you let the market play out, I mean, 20 years ago, you barely ever saw electric cars on the road. Tesla, largely without subsidies early on, sort of grew because it just became popular, kind of a cool thing that consumers wanted. You just let things play out, put everyone on an equal playing field, and it's just impractical to think we're going to be hauling in, which is very important. That's where most of our food comes from. Most
Yeah.
of our goods comes from, long haul trucking. You gotta let those folks do what they do best and not get involved in their business with these types of mandates. Really crazy, but I do want to pivot towards, there's a lot of solutions out there, especially in the energy space, that are coming from innovations from the technology companies or elsewhere, where there's innovations happening that might solve the problem without government involvement whatsoever. What do you think of some of these, whether it's nuclear power, there's a lot of innovations happening that might be able to solve these problems better. So, we're for getting rid of these mandates, but we also want solutions for the 21st century, that we need more power, but we also want cleaner environments.
Yeah. Well, I think there's three that we really need to be talking about. Number one is nuclear. We're finding out now. In my lifetime, for most of my lifetime, it was my belief, because of the information, a lot of it false or misleading out there, that it was so very dangerous. But like you said, with innovation, we're finding out that we can make it much, much safer. And one nuclear reactor or one, I believe Vermont Yankee only had one, but I'm not 100% sure. But one nuclear reactor could possibly power just about every home in the state of Vermont, which would make our energy costs drop substantially. And it would give us the option for energy in our homes for heating as well, not just lighting. That's the other thing. When we're talking about energy, we're talking about heat and light energy too. So that's one of the things. The other thing is natural gas. Natural gas is cleaner than number two heating oil or coal. So why not continue the pipelines into the Northeast, into New England to make us cleaner just that way? I read an article and I covered it on my show, on my podcast, where I think a decade or so ago, if we had those pipelines for natural gas, we would have been a cleaner economy just because we could burn natural gas. But instead, we're burning things like number two fuel oil or coal or wood chips that are dirtier than natural gas. So if we want to be clean, we should take the top three cleanest options and go with them.
It really
So
seems crazy to me to put all your chips in this basket of really some of the most unreliable energy. I think it's just
yeah,
just obvious of saying, no, we're only going to have solar, we're going to have wind, things that are known to be unreliable. If you look at what happened in Spain this past
yeah,
summer,
I was going to bring that up. I'm glad you did. And guess what? There's a report coming out that says wind and solar were the issue. It had to do with frequency and something else, but the switching, our technology couldn't handle the variations, and the safety switches just kept tripping until what was it? 40 million people were without power.
it
It
was a
was a
huge
huge number.
amount of the country
Yeah,
that had rolling blackouts. They could not power their grid, and that's really because, to your point, they chose this is the only way we're going to produce power,
yeah,
opposed to a country like France right next door that had the same exact weather conditions, the same problems. However, they didn't have any rolling blackouts because they said we're gonna. They went very into nuclear, but they had an all of the above approach,
yep.
so that if something fails, if the sun's not out, if the wind's not blowing, you have nuclear to back it up. Because we're entering, we can talk about the technology side, but in the coming years, whether it's AI or these data centers that power AI, to lead in the 21st century economy, you're going to need not just the same amount of power, which is what a lot of these states are talking about, which we're just gonna, we need to replace our systems with solar and wind to equal the amount of power we're having now. We have to like double the amount of output that we have, so that states like Vermont can lead in the coming century. And I just don't see you choosing one way or the highway is going to get you there.
No, I don't think that's really not a good option. Look at, we have in so many aspects of our lives, whether we go to the grocery store or the car dealership or the clothing store or just about any place, we have so many options to choose from. To give us only one energy option is a recipe for disaster. Just look at, what was it, 2023, the state of Texas, when they went heavy into wind and there was the ice storm, and look what happened. Not only was there loss of life, but there was billions of dollars in damage. And it was because an oil-rich state went with an intermittent energy source when they had something that was its own natural backup. All they had to do was store it in tanks, and they had plenty of oil. They probably could have used natural gas as well, but if we don't learn from these mistakes, then the state of Vermont is going to be learning the hard way, like Texas and Spain did.
Exactly. I mean, just some of these new innovations. There's a thing called small modular reactors,
Yeah. Yep.
SMRs. It was actually a U.S. Led effort to innovate in this space. However, the past few years, they were not able to build them here in the U.S. So they were building them in places like France. They would construct the actual reactor in Tennessee, and then it would ship to France because they couldn't build the facility here. Now, some of those federal problems are lessening at the regulatory level. I've seen states like New York and Massachusetts, Idaho, Wyoming, Utah, all talking about building their own SMRs. And, this is technology that really small footprint land-wise, it's like the size of a football field. And
I
on
didn't
top of
realize
that,
that's full.
they use, or like a small warehouse, and they use spent nuclear fuel.
So wait a minute. So you're telling me from the nuclear reactors that we have, they could supply the fuel for the SMRs so that we're actually, in a sense, we're recycling spent nuclear fuel.
Yes. And even
So
with,
on, so on,
large reactors still don't even spend that much. There's not much nuclear waste. However, you can have these smaller plants that then use the waste.
okay, so the smart ass in me, Ross, says we can, on the barrels with, or whatever containers there are, we can have the little recycle emblem on that going to the SMRs.
Exactly.
That would be wonderful.
Yeah, and again, it's not like that's the only solution, but there's an example of something that has a lot of power. You can power a whole county, in Vermont with one of these facilities. They're very relatively cheap too.
Really?
The big reactors are expensive, but what do you think of these ideas instead of the current plan that we're on, which really seems to be one way or the highway?
I think they're a great option. And for a couple of reasons. Number one, right now we have a tourist economy and a service economy in Vermont. We really don't have a production economy. Think of it as if we had enough of these SMRs, these small modular nuclears, so that we could actually be a net exporter of energy so that our prices would be going down and we could actually bring revenue into the state because we're selling electricity. So we're selling energy. And why not? Vermont is known throughout its history for innovation. So why not be an innovator in energy in that respect? It would seem to me it would be a great idea. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think those small modular nuclear plants do not require the level of cooling that the larger nuclear plants require. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's
Okay,
correct.
that's what I thought.
You do not need to be near a body of water. You do
Okay.
not need, a traditional nuclear plant, which I think there's only one in northern New England and New Hampshire, the Seabrook plant. It's right on the ocean. You need these huge cooling jet fans for the
Okay.
process. For these smaller ones, you do not. You don't need. I think a lot of them use salt, actually, a salt thing
Okay.
to
Yeah.
regulate heat, but they're very small. So you don't need these huge technologies. I've always really believed that this is sort of the stopgap, solution until, I know they've been talking about fusion for 50 years or whatever,
Right.
but until we can get to that point where fusion's actually a commercial business.
Yeah. Well, what about using a few of these small modular nuclear plants right up at Vermont Yankee? If we can't get Vermont Yankee recommissioned, at least there's the infrastructure there to feed it into our grid to supply us with affordable electricity, at least for part of the state. I mean, to me, it would make a viable solution to serve at least part of the state until we could allow it to prove itself as a reliable, safe source of energy to expand it across the entire state. Why
Exactly.
not?
And what happens when you then increase the amount of capacity of your energy grid? All of a sudden, all these, data tech companies,
Yep.
are going to be looking at Vermont. This is a vision for a positive future of economic growth while still protecting the culture, the environment, the way of life of Vermont. A good energy system, a good economy lifts all boats. You can get your kids to stay here in Vermont instead of leaving to other states where there's more jobs and opportunity. It really could
Exactly.
be a massive deal if we just change these little things.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. Excuse me. It's if we have to diversify our economy here, and using uh, the nuclear technology that we have as part of a way to diversify our economy, I think it's just a no-brainer. It's just a no-brainer. That and excuse me, we need to find a way to reduce or repeal some of the regulations that have made it so hard for business in the state. Every time you get into a deep conversation with somebody, they bring up the fact that Vermont is not very business friendly. Look at our wood products industry. We have a wood industry that we could revive so that our saw logs are not going north of the border and coming back as finished lumber, where we could do it here.
Mm-hmm.
So it's there's a lot we can do.
Yeah, and this, we're not talking about either like saying no, you can't, build solar panels or, build windmills. We're just saying mandating that is the problem. That's what's driving up the costs because it's unreliable. It's not going to be an abundant energy source. You'd have to cover the whole state of Vermont in windmills and solar panels to be able to have the energy growth needed for the coming decades. So
You
it's
bring up
just
another point.
impractical.
We're right in the midst of leaf peeper season. Okay. If we were to cover the number of square miles of Vermont that we would need to provide with energy from solar, we would lose that part of our tourist industry right there.
Mm-hmm.
So it's another unintended consequence of solar. And don't get me wrong, I think, like you said in the intro, I live off grid. I use solar, I use batteries, and I use a generator. I use systems that no matter what the conditions, I still have the energy that I need. That's one thing when we get into solar and wind and even batteries. You're talking about an intermittent power uh, energy source, whereas the petroleum based economy we know how to keep the storage, to keep our system up and running, no matter the sunshine, no matter the amount of wind we have. And all we need to know with our power plants now is what demand do we have? And so we know how many turbines to fire up, or how much hydroelectric power we need to direct where. So these are the things. If it needs to be a common sense, all of the above approach.
Yeah, I totally agree. Um, Looking forward to like next year, next session, when you guys go back to the state house. I'm guessing a lot of these bills will be back up there. What do you hope to see, the legislature do, hopefully pass some of these bills to roll back these mandates?
I think we're going to need a lot of participation from our constituents as well. And I say that because we know there's an enlightenment going on, not just in Vermont, not just in the United States, but worldwide. We're seeing more and more where common sense is floating to the surface here. We're using the free market, we're using science as we know it to be, is starting to dominate the conversation instead of feel good science, which is really not science at all. But reintroducing bills, but having the support of people who want to see these bills reintroduced, so that constituents send emails and make phone calls up to the State House to their representatives and to their senators, so that the representatives and senators, like, for instance, in my committee, on the Environment Committee, where we would be considering bills like, or statutes like Act 59, and is there something we can do to have it less less in competition with S-127, which I believe is Act 69 of 2025, with the Housing Initiative Bill, the Clean Heat Standard, in the Energy uh, Committee. Bring it back, take it off the wall, or at least have some of our members, some Republican members who've sponsored it, try to get it reintroduced, get the committee time to urge the committee to take it off the wall, because Vermont needs to be more affordable. And these bills will help. I have a bill, bill number 518, repeal of the Climate Superfund. And that's, this year it had a $350,000 budget. And it basically, the Climate Superfund exists to sue the quote unquote big oil petroleum industry for the so-called damage that it's done. But if we were to do a spreadsheet of pros and cons, I don't think we could justify it. So why are we spending that money on suing petroleum companies instead of putting that money into affordability issues that we know will reap results for Vermonters? So it's going to be a combined effort, not just the legislators, but voters getting involved, informing themselves, and staying involved. It's about civic activity and civic involvement. I think that's how we fix it. The election last November was proof for me that civic involvement and civic activity, and speaking to your legislators or candidates and knowing what they're proposing or what they're sponsoring, it's going to make a difference. It really is.
It was a great starting point, for Vermonters to finally speak up and get involved, and they all drove out to the polls, and you had that massive result. But
Yeah.
I know you're still in the minority there, Representative, under the dome. So you can kind of stop some of the bad, but you can't pass the good. Some of the stuff we've been talking about the past 40 minutes is, we'd love to pass these good solutions that, take this all of the above approach, but currently you don't have the numbers to do that. You
That's correct.
can, to your point, make a huge difference. People underestimate the power of your voice, especially in your state legislature. They will
Yeah.
listen to you. You put enough pressure on them, speak up, make your voice heard on these issues. Talk about how it's impacting you personally. Talk
Yes.
about these bills. I've always thought it'd be, if you remember, years ago, Market Basket, the big supermarket chain across, New Hampshire, Maine, Vermont, Maine, and Massachusetts.
Yep.
They all went and put their receipts from other stores on the windows of competing of Market Baskets to say they were shopping somewhere else. It'd be great for people to say, somehow show their politicians, look how much my bill has increased. And this is due to your stubbornness, unwillingness to work with the other side to actually, solve some of these problems. So make your voice heard is the big thing.
The other thing I want to point out, and we're finding out more and more, without subsidies, these green initiatives will fall flat on their face. Let the free market choose where the voter decides to spend their money. If somebody wants to put in a high efficiency pellet stove, let them. If someone wants to switch to a higher efficiency oil-fired system because they're currently oil-fired, and that would be the cheapest way, and rather than a very expensive heat pump system, which still in the very cold weather is probably not going to give you what you need, then why not? Why not? There are, if we don't have options, then that's when the costs go, they go too high. They just go too high. So that's another thing that we need to think about. But the subsidies, that people don't realize, without subsidies, a lot of the solar and wind projects that we've had never would have been affordable, and they never would have been cheaper than the other options for energy.
Yeah, and it's really government spending money to make energy more expensive. I mean, when you get down to it, and when we say free market, really what that means is consumer choice, people being able to choose what is the best product for them. To your point, I love pellet stoves personally. That's a great way to heat your house in the winter. Some years it's cheaper, some years it's not, depending on how your other options. But having those options is what's most important. And right now, it's just being limited by government intrusion. And hopefully, it's a better winter for folks, because we live in a cold state, and when we're relying on one option of energy, you're putting all your chips in one basket. That's a roll of the dice if you get a real cold spell.
Yeah, and I think I'm not 100% sure about the pellets. I am going to be next week, or is it tomorrow? Actually, it's tomorrow. I'm going to be going and doing a tour of a pellet manufacturing plant. But I'm pretty sure that, like you said, with free market, if we have an improving housing market, the cost of your pellets are going to be cheaper because there's going to be more byproduct to make the pellets with. So just keep that in mind. If we make Vermont more affordable in other aspects, then your pellets are going to be cheaper as well.
It's a good point. Any parting, thoughts or encouragement to listeners and watchers of the podcast?
I just try to urge people to get involved, stay involved. Find a way to get involved. If it's becoming an elected official in your town or in your county, or if it's just where you become a part of any local committee that's civically active or politically active, find a way, because I know with me, when I found my voice, it's kind of intimidating in the beginning, but then all of a sudden you find it's very empowering, because you learn a lot very quickly. And you also, one of the main things you learn is you're not alone in your thoughts and your feelings. And when you can network with people, that's when you can get more done with less of your own time, because there's more people on the team. So I just try to urge people, inform yourself and get involved, and you will be surprised at how quickly we can make some of these changes happen.
Exactly. Your voice is louder than you think, especially with your legislator. You can really make a difference speaking up, getting involved in your local community, talking about these issues. Don't be afraid to talk about these things. These are not extreme positions, Representative, we've been talking about today.
No, they're not.
These are very reasonable solutions to a very serious problem, which is energy production. We definitely don't want to backtrack towards a time where, I think the environment was much dirtier back in the early 1900s, using coal and wood, where we only had a couple options. Now we have all these options. Government shouldn't be picking which options are best.
And two words for your listeners: common sense. Under the Golden Dome, there's not enough of that. So input from the voters and constituents helps let common sense prevail.
Great way to end it. Well, Representative, thank you so much for joining and being my first guest on our
Glad
first
to be
episode. And thank you all for watching the Green Mountain Prosperity Podcast. Don't forget to like and share this episode with your friends and on social media. And we'll be doing more of these going forward as frequently as we can, covering some of these really important topics. I hope to cover both some Vermont issues, New England issues, and across the country. These conversations are super important. So I hope everyone enjoyed today's conversation. Don't forget, you can get involved. It's been ticking right at the bottom of your screen there. by visiting greenmountainprosperity.com. You can actually send a letter right to your representative on some of these issues right through the website. We make it as easy as possible for you. So thank you for tuning in today. Hope you all have a great week, and we'll talk to you next time, Vermont.